From Arcana Celestia 3998. In the course of this work, it has been frequently shown that times when they are mentioned in the word as ages, years, months, weeks, days, and hours signify states of the mind. But with the Lord there are no states of mind, for all with him is eternal and infinite. From Apocalypse Explained 1131. God, because he is eternal, is also infinite. But as there is a natural idea of eternity as well as a spiritual one, the same is also true of infinity. The natural idea of eternity is derived from time, but the spiritual idea is not. There is a like difference between a natural and a spiritual idea in respect to infinity. The natural idea is drawn from space, but not the spiritual. As nature is not life, so neither are those two properties of nature, time and space's life, but they are from life, which is God, and they are created along with nature. The natural idea of the infinite God, which is drawn from space, is that he fills the universe from one end to the other. But from such an idea of infinity, this thought arises, that God must be the inmost form of nature, and thus that he is extended, and all extension is material. But as this natural idea does not in the least agree with the idea of life, wisdom and love, which are God, therefore infinity must be seen from a spiritual idea, in which there is nothing of space, no more than there is of time, because there is not anything of nature. The conclusions to which a spiritual idea leads are that the divine love is infinite, and also the divine wisdom, and as these are the life that is God, it follows that the divine life is also infinite, and lastly, that God is infinite. It may be concluded that the divine wisdom is infinite from the wisdom of the angels of the third heaven. These, in consequence of their excelling all others in wisdom, perceive that there is no ratio or proportion between their wisdom and the divine wisdom of the Lord, because there is no ratio between the infinite and the finite. That is, because the infinite and the finite are unalike in kind. They also say that the first step in wisdom is to see and acknowledge the truth of this. The same is also true of the divine love. From Arcana Celestia 1382. It cannot be but that natural men will confound the divine infinity with an infinity of space, and as they must necessarily hold an infinity of space to be that which in fact is nothing, the consequence must be that they will not believe in the divine infinity. The same is true of eternity. A man who derives his thoughts from time cannot but take this to be an eternity of time, when yet the fact is that eternity is presented by time to those who are in time. From Divine Love and Wisdom, number 17. It is generally admitted that God is infinite, for he is called the infinite, but he is called so because he is actually infinite. He is infinite not only because he is the underived esse and existere itself, but because there are infinities in him. Unless there were infinities in him, infinity would be nothing more than a bare name. The infinities in him cannot be called infinitely many, nor infinitely all, on account of the natural idea which is involved in the words many and all. The natural idea of infinitely many is a limited idea, and though infinitely all is unlimited, still it is derived from the limited objects of the universe. Man, therefore, in consequence of his having such a natural idea, cannot, by any mental sublimation and approximation, attain to a perception of the infinities in God. An angel, because his idea is spiritual, may indeed by mental sublimation and approximation be raised a degree above man, and yet not to a perception of the infinities in God. Apocalypse Explained 1.2.2.2. The divine essence is neither in space, nor is he extended, but he causes spaces and extensions in the ultimate degrees of his creation to exist in the heavens, apparently, and in the world, actually. But still, spaces and extensions are not spaces and extensions before God, for he is omnipresent in his divine essence. From True Christian Religion, number 31. The infinity of God in respect to spaces is called immensity, and in respect to time, eternity. And yet, notwithstanding these relations, there is not anything of space in his immensity, nor anything of time in his eternity. The infinity of God in respect to spaces is called immensity, because the term immense is predicated of what is great and ample, and also of what is extended, and here of that which is spacious in extent. But the infinity of God in respect to time is called eternity, because the expression to eternity is predicated of those progressions without end, which are measured by times. As for example, the terraqueous globe, considered in itself, the properties of space are predicated, and they constitute spaces, and the properties of time are predicated of its rotation and progression, and they constitute times, and they are from the senses so presented in the perception of every reflecting mind. But in God there is neither space nor time, and yet from God are the initiaments of both, and therefore it is that his infinity in respect to spaces is understood by immensity, and in respect to times by eternity. But in heaven the angels, by the immensity of God, have a perception of the divinity as to his esse, and by eternity the divinity as to his existere. By immensity they also have a perception of the divinity in respect to his love, and by eternity in respect to his wisdom. For the angels abstract spaces and time from the divinity, and abstracting these, the above perceptions are the result. But as a natural man cannot think otherwise than according to the ideas which he has taken from the properties of space and time, he can perceive nothing of the immensity of God before spaces, and nothing of his eternity before times. And if he is desirous and attempts to do it, his mind falls, as it were, into a swoon, and he is not unlike a shipwrecked person when he is thrown into the water, or as one on the point of being swallowed up by an earthquake. But should he persist in the attempt to penetrate into these subjects with ideas taken from the space and time of nature, he might easily fall into a kind of delirium, which would at last terminate in the denial of God. I was once brought into a similar state by revolving in my mind what God was from eternity, what he did before the world was formed, whether he deliberated with himself about the creation, whether he devised the order according to which he intended to proceed, whether deliberate thought were possible in a pure vacuum, and with a number of other absurd fantasies. But to prevent my falling into a delirium by such merely natural speculations, my mind was raised by the Lord into the sphere and the light which interior angels enjoy, and then after the idea of space and time, in which my former thought was involved, had been a little removed, I was enabled to comprehend that the eternity of God is not an eternity of time or progression, and that as before the world there was no time, it was altogether idle to attribute such properties to God. And from Divine Love and Wisdom, number 283. Everyone whose thought is grounded in a clear reason sees that as it is not possible for anything to be from nothing, therefore the universe is not created from nothing, for nothing is a mere negation. and to make something out of nothing is a contradiction. But a proposition which is contradictory to itself is contrary to the light of that truth which is from divine wisdom, and whatsoever is not from divine wisdom cannot be produced by the divine omnipotence. He who thinks from a clear reason also sees that there is a substance from which all things are created, and that this is a substance in itself, or underived, and the very esse or ground of being, from which it is possible for all things that are in being to exist. And that as there is none other substance in itself, or underived, save God, who is consequently the very esse or ground of being, it follows that the existence of things can be from no other source but from him. Many men have been able to see this truth, for reason has enabled them to perceive it, who yet have not ventured to confirm it, from the dread lest it might perhaps lead them to conclude that the created universe was God, because it was from God, or that nature was self-derived, and thus that in its inmost principle was that which is called God. This is the cause of dread which many men have of advancing a step beyond their first thoughts on this subject, notwithstanding their conviction that there cannot be any other producing cause for the existence of all things but God, from whose esse they are all derived. For they are afraid of involving their intellect in a sort of Gordian knot, as it is called, from which they might not afterwards be able to extricate from it. But the inability to extricate the intellect arises from this, that they think of God and of the creation of the universe by God from time and space, which are the properties of nature, and from nature no one can have any perception of God and of the creation of the universe, although anyone whose intellect is somewhat in interior light can have a perception of nature and its creation from God, because God is not in time and space. But although God has created the universe and all that it contains from himself, still there is not any one thing in the created universe which is God. From Arcana Celestia number 7270. There is but one only substance, which is really substance, and all things besides are formations from it. That one only substance rules throughout the formations, not only as form, but also as non-form, such as form is in its origin. Unless this were so, it would not be possible for anything formed to subsist and act. But this is spoken for the intelligent. And from Divine Love and Wisdom, number 75. Times, which are the properties of nature in its world, are pure states of mind in the spiritual world, which states appear progressive, because angels and spirits are finite. It follows therefore that in God they are not progressive, because he is infinite, and the infinities in him are one. And from this it follows that the divine essence in all time is himself devoid of time.